Namaste and greetings. I, Mahima Kapoor, researcher and assistant editor at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, welcome you all to the IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. In light of the budget announcement on the 1st of February, we have gathered for a panel discussion on Cities and Union Budget 2022 to 23 under the series The State of Cities, #City Conversations. This deliberation is being organized by the IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies. I feel honored to introduce the chair, Dr. Rumi Aijaz. Sir is the Senior Fellow and Head, Urban Policy Research Initiative, Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are fortunate to have Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay as the moderator for the session. Sir is an associate professor, Visva-Bharati, Santiniketan, and visiting senior fellow, IMPRI, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. I feel privileged to introduce our eminent panel for today. Professor Chetan Vaidya is an independent urban advisor and former director, School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee is a professor at Center for Urban Economic Studies, Department of Economics, University of Calcutta. Welcome, ma'am. Dr. Sandeep Thakur is an associate professor and head, Center for Municipal Finance, Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. Professor Tathagat Chatterjee is a professor of urban management and governance, Xavier University, Bhubaneswar. Welcome, sir. And Dr. Vishwanath Alok is an associate professor of public finance, Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. We also have with us Mr. Sunil Unhale, Mr. Chi Chakravarti, and Mr. Arvind Uni as the discussants. Mr. Unhale is the Joint Commissioner, Department of Municipal Administration, Government of Maharashtra. Welcome, sir. Mr. Chakravarti is an urban economist and has formerly taught urban economics, Indian urban development, and project finance at leading institutions such as SPA and Intact. Welcome, sir. And Mr. Uni is the thematic lead, Urban Poverty, Indo-Global Social Service Society, Delhi. Welcome, sir. Now, I invite Dr. Chattopadhyay to take the proceedings further, and we look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahima, and good evening to all of you, and namaskar. So, as this IMPRI started this city conversation series in 2019, and here mainly we deliberate on the disparate problems of the cities of the developing countries and how to make them more livable and equitable and sustainable. And today's discussion, as this title suggests, is on union budgets. And all we know that Indian cities have been facing two pressing challenges. One, to make the cities livable by addressing the service deficiencies, which are all pervasive, and second, to make the cities as engines of economic growth, to make them attractive before the investors. And COVID-19 has brutally exposed the realities of service inequalities. Several studies have also noted the livelihood crises that the urban citizens are experiencing. And quite rightly, this year's budget calls for a sort of paradigm change in the ways our cities are managed and planned. But it is the finally budgetary details of the resource allocation in urban programs, and also some of the broad urban policy guidelines that determines the speed as well as the trajectory of this paradigm change. And we are fortunate enough to have with us today some of the India's leading urban experts to dissect those finer details and their implications for urban development. So it seems to be a very engaging discussion. So with these few words, let me now request once again, I welcome on behalf of Team IMPRI, I welcome all the panelists as well as the discussions. And with these few words, let me now request our chair today, Dr. Rumi Aijaz, to say a few words and take forward the proceedings. It's over to you. So.
Thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay. And I would also like to thank Mahima for the introduction. My greetings to the distinguished speakers and participants in today's program. It was interesting to see the budget proceedings and the documents that have been prepared by the best minds in India. And the discussions in the media on this topic or on this subject were equally interesting. On the one hand, the government argues that this is the best budget in the world. And at the same time, there are opposition parties who have a different opinion. Many of the parties are unhappy with the proposals. And some say that there is too much emphasis on urban. And they are not entirely wrong, because still a significant proportion of the country's population lives in rural areas or villages. Although India is urbanizing, but the transition is gradual, as we all know. And it is going to take several years when half of the country's population will live in urban areas. I think this is a normal situation. This is normal human behavior. When you try to do something, people can have different opinions. And it is not very easy to keep everybody happy. In fact, it's a challenge. But constructive criticism, as we always say, is good in our field and in all other fields that are being pursued. It helps in strengthening or improvement of policies and strategies, and can result in better impact of the efforts that governments and non-government organizations are doing. Now, when we look at what has been provided in the budget documents, I can clearly see that the urban sectors, some urban sectors have been given more importance. And supplementary measures have also been recommended to ensure or to achieve what has been proposed. By supplementary measures, I mean emphasis on capacity building, finance, resource mobilization, etc., center of excellence. And when we look at the data that are provided in the document, in terms of allocations, I see three or four things that are good for us as a starting point for our analysis. The first, I think, is the overall picture. And by this, I mean that over the previous year, or when we compare with the previous year, there has been a 3 to 4% enhancement or increase in the allocations. The second observation is that some sectors have received higher allocations. And this trend is not much different from what was done previously. And by some sectors, I mean mobility, including mass transport and metro rail projects, and housing. So in terms of absolute figures or absolute data, the allocations are maximum for these two sectors. The third observation is when we compare the different programs or the Government of India missions on urban, then two things are standing out. One is about the National Livelihood Mission, and the second is the Swachh Bharat Mission. So the increase is comparatively more insofar as these two missions are concerned when we compare with the other missions. And the final fourth point is about the allocations that have been received for all of the missions. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has been running a series of missions. So the budget shows that all of these missions have received allocations. None of the missions, as far as I have understood, have been ignored. So for us to make a meaningful contribution through this program, I think some points can be discussed. This is being discussed at various platforms, but I think this is a very good opportunity. We have eminent speakers, very knowledgeable persons in today's program, and it could be useful when IMPRI tries to take this work forward in terms of documenting the ideas shared in today's program. The first thing is about SWOT, SWOT. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats that one can think of when the budget is strong? What are the deficiencies? What opportunities do this offer? And are there any threats? And by threat, I think I'm referring to the overdependence of states and local governments on central assistance. And related to this, I would add here, is this sufficient? Is this budget sufficient in the context of emerging challenges that India is grappling with? How inclusive is this budget? And whether we should see these trends in the light of the pandemic. Pandemic has adversely affected most sectors, and the importance being given to urban has also been affected to a great extent. The second point is about challenges experienced in devolution of funds. So one is, and all the knowledgeable persons are speaking about this, that you devolve a lot of money, you transfer, you say on paper you've transferred, you will be transferring so much money to the states. How much of that has reached, and what are the challenges in this regard? The third point is about previous experiences, especially utilization of funds. Are there non-partisan or unbiased studies that have been conducted which demonstrate or highlight the experiences of the past? Are there some important lessons to learn? The fourth point is about, as I said, dependence of states and urban local bodies or urban local governments, such as or municipalities, on center. How much of these, although budget is very important for a country like India, but how much should be the dependence of lower tiers of government on the center? or whether greater efforts are required to mobilize funds by the local institutions or the municipalities. And the final point is about what do the state governments and union territories think of this budget. These are some things that strike me when I look at the budget document, and I would want to myself, not asking you, respond to some of these points in my future writings, because I think that these are relevant points. Now, these were the brief introductory remarks. I would like to invite the panelists in today's program. And I would also request the panelists to maintain the timings according to the program circulated. Panelists have 8 minutes and discussants have 5 minutes. And we have 5 panel speakers and 3 discussants. So if we have to finish on time, then, and to ensure that everybody gets sufficient time, the speaker who's going to speak last in today's program gets sufficient time. For their sake, I would request the speakers who begin to maintain their timings. And I would like to begin with Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee. And over to you, Dr. Chatterjee.
Ma'am, please unmute yourself. Aliana, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Aijaz, and thank you, Soumyadip, and thanks to IMPRI for asking me. And I didn't know I have to be the opening batsman or batter. What do they say now? Let me first start with the fact that a budget is an annual thing. It's not a 5-year plan that we would go for, have time for evaluation or its impact. You know, when there were 5-year plans, there were midterm impact evaluations and impacts. Here we don't have such scope, because starting from April 1, when the next budget is being presented, even that year is not finished. That is a problem, that this is a short-term thing. Now, when I looked at the budget speech, or when I heard the budget speech, and when I looked at its written form, what I did, I just counted the term urban, how many times it is there. And I found that in this 32-page document, it has occurred about say 22 times. So I'm leaving the last 3 because they are part of the tables. And apart from that, there are 22 times. Now it starts with the first 2 are about the linkage of the urban part with 2 of the transport projects. First one is the multimodal transportation, railways and other modes of transportation, and it's linked with urban development or urbanization. The second is about a new project, it's not a new project, but a new emphasis on the ropeways, and it says Parvatmala, but it also says that apart from the hilly areas, it can also be a boon in case of very congested urban areas. So these 2 are linked with transportation, but what has made me happy is that there is a separate subsection on urban planning. I don't know why it was named urban planning, because it is mainly about urbanization, the pace of urbanization. It starts by saying that about half of the population of your urban area, though there is a way going on that this Amrit thing is about the next 25 years, it is what will be India in 2047. So maybe in 2047, of course, half of our population will be in urban areas. And so we should gear up. And one part of gearing up is long-term thinking. That is, we should change the paradigm. We should change, and we should start with changing our the way the urban planning education is going on. And it calls for establishment of, I don't know whether it is establishment or upgrading the institutions we already have as centers for excellence. And they say, it says that there will be a committee of our planners, and I'm very happy as an economist that it calls for urban economists to be there in the committee, because somebody told me, yeah, you deal with urban economics, that is an extinct species. So the extinct species is called for be in the meeting in that committee. But we don't know how this, what will be the composition of the committee, what will be the terms of reference, but we understand it is something to do with the so-called urban planning education, urban planning education, and on the whole, bringing urban education in the mainstream. That is what we understood from the whole paragraph, and it called, and that is very, very, very important for me, because as we all know that, don't take it otherwise, but when urban planning exercises started in India in the post-independence period, it basically started with the architects and regional architects. They were not at that time, till they were not called regional planners. The regional planning term came late with the establishment of School of Planning and Architecture and others. And just a few days back, I was going through a document which talked about, that is the fourth foundation paradigm that was there in India in the starting from the mid-50s, and all the so-called master plans and the parastatal bodies that came up with that, the DDA, CMDA, MRDA, etc. Everything was on the guidelines given by the Fourth Foundation. And after so many years, we think that we haven't been able to come out of that paradigm. And if this particular budget emphasizes on changing the paradigm, that is our welcome move, surely a welcome move. And I wholeheartedly agree to the plan, because what has been going on in India in terms of urban development and urban planning, though this is a city is about union budget and city, that is the topic, I must say that in a country like top-heavy urbanization and others, we rarely talk about the smaller cities and towns and their condition. Apart from IDMCT and the part which was a part of JNNURM, there is hardly an emphasis on the towns and cities starting from the middle tier. We just forget them when we do the plans, when we do the projects, when we go for some mission, we just forget them. So this is just a backlash type of thing that is happening. That is, we are putting more and more resource, more and more infrastructure on the bigger cities and towns, on the metropolis and others, and the smaller towns, and people are coming to these bigger cities for better, for an expectation of better living with better infrastructure and others. So the paradigm change should start from there. I don't know what the people who wrote this whole thing meant by paradigm change, but my paradigm change would start from the smaller cities and towns, bringing them in the mainstream and bringing them in the whole planning process. And it is also a welcome change that it recognizes that urban studies, urban planning, etc. is a multidisciplinary thing. Multidisciplinary thing. You have to include social scientists, you have to include people from other discipline, even given the pandemic, the so-called health scientists, the people who deal with mental health, everybody has to be brought into this urban thing. That is also a very welcome change. And this is a part where this urban part is reallocated. The third section where urban is emphasized is on the housing part. On the housing part, there I just don't, I don't have the calculation to say that how much has been increased on this particular aspect, but there is talk about, again, housing for all, and also there is talk of the structure, and there is a line that the state governments would be helped by the central government in this regard. And so that is also a thing. And the cooperative sector has been asked to revamp. Is a plan to revamp them for enhancing this urban housing sector, and that is also a very good thing, that apart from this real estate driven housing type of thing, if the cooperative sector is revamped and enough allocation is made, enough incentive is made in the cooperative sector, then maybe what we are seeing today in terms of the gated communities and others would change into much smaller type of thing. But what is missing here, that nothing is written about the most vital thing in the urban, that is land. We hardly see anything about land and urban land and land policy, looking at the aspects of environmental and ecological preservation, but providing urban land. Maybe budget is not the right place to that, but there should be something about urban land policy, which would enhance all these things, that is transit-oriented development, housing, etc. So I stop here. I think I'm within time. If I have chance, I will say something later.
You are well within time. Thank you very much. That was a very professional approach, starting and finishing on time. The points that you mentioned are welcome. They are important. One is about bringing urban education in mainstream. Yes, certainly there is a great need for improving the quality of urban education, and similarly for capacity building. About your point on the smaller towns and cities, the budget does include a line on tier 2-3 cities, in addition to mega city development. But time will tell how all of this unfolds. I think your opinion on ropeways is interesting and good.
It's not my opinion, it's written there.
Your reaction on your reaction on ropeways is good, because when you travel to many of the hill towns, then the kind of problems that people face in commuting within the town, especially when they have to climb heights, can be very troublesome and time consuming. And therefore, if this is done, it will be very good for the people living in those areas. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite the second speaker, who is equally well versed and experienced in this field, Professor Chetan Vaidya.
Thank you to IMPRI for this opportunity. I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes.
Properly. Yeah. And thank you, Rumi, for that very comprehensive points, and of course, Madam and other people who spoke before me. First of all, I was not expecting much from the budget, honestly. Some increase maybe in the mission, urban missions, but I was not expecting much. And then this comes the focus on urban planning, the Center for Excellence in Urban Development, also facilitating small and medium cities, sustainable transport, modernization of bylaws, oriented development, and town planning scheme. So this is like a dream budget for urban planning sector, experts both and urban economists. It is all people deal with urban I think it's a dream budget, and that paradigm change has been mentioned many times before. In addition to all this, I thought I should focus on this. Since the budget focuses on public capital investment in infrastructure, and I think there is increase of almost 35% in capital investment, impact on the long-term interest-free loans to states, which will of course be also forwarded to cities. So that is going to have a main thing. There's also for climate change. I think our cities are where the battle of climate change will be won or lost. So there is focus on climate change, which will be help. There is focus on ease of doing business, which would mean online building plan approval, registration of land records, including focus on digital land records and simplification of trade licenses. All three would help in the cities when we increase ease of doing business. Mention of green bonds, which I think is done to cities, and the startup promotion will obviously help the cities. I think all this is very positive. And one particular thing which some of you may have missed is there is specific mention of what initiatives can be taken in GIFT City, new city outside Ahmedabad, near Gandhinagar in Gujarat, where they are saying there could be foreign universities in certain cities where there will be no Indian education. There will be international arbitration and focus on climate finance. So I think that is something which we can see our new cities will be now supported with this policy decision. Unfortunately, all is not very positive this budget, which has been mentioned by Rumi before. There is very little increase in overall budget of our ministry, 3 to 4%. And whatever increases is basically for PWD scheme, which is for Central Vista project. I think that is not very positive. There is, of course, increase in Prime Minister housing project, but it's not clear how much is for rural and how much is for urban. I did not get those numbers. And the whole housing program, affordable housing program, rental housing for migrant is not linked to overall slum upgradation. I think that is something which is missing. Now, for me, the smart city, Amroth, SBM, Swachh Bharat mission, they're all like playing T20 games. Quick wins, we want to show something to people, kuch ho raha hai, something is happening. But if you really want to improve urban sector, you don't need just T20, you need a series of test matches in urban sector. Fortunately, this national committee, which is going up very soon on looking at capacity, I sincerely believe this committee will look at the draft national urban policy framework. This is the way developed by the ministry. It's always available. It is available in public domain. People should look at it and see how this could be linked to specific schemes and specific programs, some of which has been mentioned earlier. There is also very little increase in national urban livelihood. I think that is very unfortunate. I was expecting that this may be a budget where we'll bring in urban livelihood kind of thing like the rural livelihood mission. I think we should have, right? Orissa is trying it out. I think we should look at it seriously and support kind of initiative. NULM could become the mission which will support livelihood mission. Even Chennai, Madras is trying to do it. Chennai, Tamil Nadu is doing it in 2 or 3 cities. But that is something which we should seriously look in. But finally, as some of our people, if you really want to improve our urban sector, we will have to strengthen public participation and inclusive development. I think that is the fourth level of governance, which NGOs, civil society, that all has to be strengthened, and we need to empower our local bodies. I have a feeling now that local bodies leadership is not to be trusted, which is most unfortunate. I'm not saying the budget is that, but eventually all that we urban sector, if we really don't want to do it as 1 or 2 large construction projects, maybe very successfully implemented, we have become expert in implementing projects now. If you really want to have long-term impact on the urban sector, the focus has to be on public participation and empowering local bodies. I'm going to stop with that, Rumi, and if opportunity is there, I'll be happy to add some more points in future. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Professor Vaidya. That was very interesting and enlightening, especially your 2 points about public participation and empowerment of urban local bodies. I do not know how much the budget could have played a role insofar as these 2 points are concerned, but there could have been some statements, more emphasis, because these documents are treated very seriously by the state governments, officials, functionaries, and it might have made a difference if these 2 aspects had been emphasized at various places. There are many sectors in which these 2 play a role, and therefore more emphasis was certainly needed. Thanks a lot. We'll come back to you, sir. Now I would like to invite Dr. V.N. Alok, who is with the Indian Institute of Public Administration. Dr. Alok has a phenomenal understanding of the urban sector and municipal finance issues. So over to you, Dr. Alok.
So please unmute yourself. Yes.
Okay, thanks to RF and IMPRI for the invite. I'm in fact delighted to be part of this panel discussions on cities and union budget 2022-23. The budget proposals was presented on the 1st of February in the Lok Sabha, and the House is there in motion. I will be making my presentation in 4 points. In fact, I'll be addressing these 4 questions. What are the prevailing economic conditions under which this budget was presented? The second was whether this union budget can address all those issues, related to cities, as you very rightly said. The third could be, what are the proposals there in the budget which could be analyzed for the urban sector? Some of you have analyzed those sectors there, those proposals. And what could be the impediments in the implementations of those proposals? The first point, what are the prevailing economic challenges, which is very, very important because this budget is not a very ordinary budget. The budget proposal was actually released in a very highly and complex and challenging economic environment. It's not only for the cities, but for the country and even for the world. So what are those prevailing economic challenges, which actually arose due to this 2 stunning shocks? The first is the health shock, and because of that, you have the economic shocks due to the lockdowns. We do have, as you know, very high rate of unemployment and job losses. The Indian Labour Organization's data, it suggests that the India's unemployment to population, which is above the 15 years of age, it has dropped from 55% 2005 to 43% 2020, which is a very, very big drop. This is actually lower than Bangladesh, China, and Vietnam. It's about 52% in China, and very, very high there in Vietnam, the employment rate. The women contributions, as you can see in the city economies, in India is just about 20% to the entire workforce. It's not there in other countries, about 30 to 70% or so. The CMI data suggests that the CMI data is the very, very recent data, though we do not really have the NSSO data for the recent years. That was what the NSSO data was for 2011 or so. So the CMI data says that we have lost about 1 crore jobs between 2016 to December 2021. I mean, this is the period which covers not only the COVID-19 period, this period covers demonetizations, the implementation of GST, and of course the COVID-19. So these are some of the challenges. There was one of the challenge was, many people say, the large number of people were pushed into the abject poverties, including the urban poverties. This claim again can be made based on the CMI survey. Okay, because the NSS data, the official data, does not really suggest, because this was made again in 2011 and not beyond. So the other claims about the economy, and particularly the urban economy, it has actually coming back to square one, the pre-COVID-19. As we can see, the quick estimates are just here with me. That was released on the 7th of January 2022. It says that the service sectors, which includes many sectors, including constructions, financial, real estates, professional services, it has registered a very, very slow growth rate. And in fact, the sector like the trade, hotels, transport, communication services, which is the core of the urban sector's economy, it has registered a negative growth rate. I'm not talking about the previous year's figures. I'm talking about the base years is 2019 and 20. And from 2019 and 20, the 2 years periods, we have actually registered 8.5% contractions. So we have to come back to that level again when the normalcy is restored. And then this particular sector will see how they grow further. So these are some of the challenges. Whether this second point, whether this union budget can address these issues. As Rumi, you know, we are the federal country. Okay, the Article 1 of the Constitution says the India, that is Bharat, shall be union states. We do have a union government. We have a state government, 28 states, and we have about 8 union territories. Now down the line, 250,000 odd panchayats and about 5,000 odd municipalities, as you rightly said. Out of these 5,000 odd municipalities, about 150 or so municipal corporations for big cities. Rest of them are municipal councils and nagar panchayats. Okay, typically the union government collects the buoyant source of revenues. About 65% of the total revenues of the country collects. The state collects about 35%. That includes some of the tax collections by the municipal bodies. And transfer mechanisms, I mean, on the expenditure side, the state governments are actually responsible for most of the services, including some of the urban services that either the state, as we all know, they render through the parastatals or the municipal bodies, right? Municipal bodies are again, it draws powers from the state governments, because Indian constitutions is actually identified 2 orders of government. And after your 74th constitutional amendment is just a patchwork over the 2 orders of government. And the fiscal architecture is still identified these 2 levels of government. So largely, as you very rightly said, the municipal bodies, they have to depend quite a lot either on the state government or the union government. Largely the union government, which means there's a centralization of revenue collections and the decentralization of expenditure responsibilities. Barring the few municipal corporations, as the previous speakers, one of the panelists said, the small cities and the transitions areas, they just collect about 5 to 10% or so. Rest of them, they rely on the transfers. And the transfers could be either the Union Finance Commission transfers under Article 283C, and the State Finance Commission transfers, and the verticals. The verticals we will be talking about in this budgets, because in this, the centrally sponsored scheme, the central sector scheme, these are the announcements in the budgets. So that brought to this third point, what are the proposals there in the budget, which we can analyze. Before Rumi, before I get into the expenditure side of the budget, just a line or two on the receipt side. In fact, the number shows that the center's revenue receipts across taxes and dividends, it stood from 17.3 lakhs crores, okay, to close to 17.9 lakhs crores, which means from a budget estimates of 17.3 for the 2022-23, we have already achieved 17.3, which means we will be crossing the budget estimates marks, even the revised estimates marks, which is actually a good thing. That is due to the good income tax and the GST collections, right? And this GST collection, income tax collections, is because of the impressive performance by the organized sectors. Though the disinvestment is still very, very slow for many reasons. I don't know the person who is responsible for disinvestment, why that person does not lose his job. Because as many people say, that the administrative machinery is not in support of the disinvestments. So we do set some targets like 1.75 lakhs or so, but we achieve very little. So I think that is something one has to see. Despite higher revenue collections, we have this fiscal deficit, which is about 6.9% of the GDP, which is actually higher than the budget estimates for the current year. This fiscal deficit is because of the additional spending towards food and fertilizers. Some of the food subsidies have been assigned to the urban sector as well, but fertilizers, Manrega, export incentives, so all these items, it has actually contributed to higher fiscal deficit. Now, because we have good tax collections, that can provide a good fiscal policy freedom to the finance ministers. And they can actually address some of the economic challenges, what actually I actually outlined, and some of the other challenges that we have. The single idea, the big idea there in the budget is to regenerate growth. That was the overall idea, and the employment generations in particular. And this employment generation is just a gainful employment generations, not just the employment generation out of relief measures, right? There's a difference between the two. If you provide employment out of relief measures, which is going to be very temporary, and if you provide employment as on a permanent basis, which is gainful employment, that's going to be there for that's going to sustain for a long period. There was some announcement, as the previous speakers have said, for capital expenditures for the fiscal year 2022. I'm just taking under 3-4 minutes or so, if you allow. For the fiscal 2022-23, they have proposed the increase in the capital expenditure from 7 to 7.5 lakhs from 6 lakhs in the current fiscals. This was there was actually a very little increase in revenue expenditures, which is not the case in the earlier budgets, which is actually a very good trend, that if you spend money on capital expenditures, it's a good trend for the urban sector as well, because finally this is going to percolate down to the urban sectors, the service sector economies as such. And because, as you know, the capital expenditure in the past, the trend, it was on an average about 12%. If you analyze the data from 2011 and 12, which has gone up to 16% from in 2022-23, and now going towards 19 to 20% or so, which is a good thing, which is actually a very, very good thing. The intention of this capital expenditure is actually to promote domestic manufacturing across sectors. And, you know, if you remember, there was in the last budget, there was something called the production linked incentives, the PLI, which was there across 13 odd sectors with an outlay of about 2 lakhs crores of rupees. Now, the idea of the PLI is to generate employment and boost output. I mean, some of the people suggest that why can't this scheme be employment and production linked incentives so that you can track both employment and productions along with the schemes. Actually, states have been provided 1 lakh crores of rupees to undertake capital spending. And this is over and above the devolutions that you get of the Union Finance Commissions, the revenue deficit grants under Article 275. So this is over and above this. And this is actually available to them to the extent of 4% of the gross state domestic products, right? Right. So those are there. Now, let me come to the grants, right? Especially meant for the cities. First is the Union Finance Commission grants, which is under Article 283C, which is about 23,000 crore. I think Sandeep will be talking more about that. And this is just 23,000 crores. Previously, it was 14.6 thousand crores or so. I think Sandeep will be talking at length about this. This was this particular grant was coupled with the health grants because some vaccination was also involved into this. There is the budget. There's no hike in the budget about the health sectors because I think the vaccines have been taken out of this health outlay. So I could see that there is a demand. I'm just seeing there's you are talking about the allocations for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And I could see that there was a budget estimates of 76,000 crores of rupees from 54,000 crores of rupees. I'm comparing the budget estimates to budget estimates. Okay, if you compare the revised estimate to budget estimates, is going to be 73,000 crore. That was the revised estimate of the previous year or the current year to 75.5, which means there is not much increase as the previous speakers have said. So out of this, I can see the very interesting item is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. And in the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, there's about 80 lakhs houses have been proposed for till the year 2024. The interesting scheme things, Rumi, I just wanted to mention that from the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, there is no provisions in this budget. Within a bracket, it has been mentioned this scheme is financed from the Central Road and Infrastructure Funds. Okay, so there is no allocation as such to the Ministry of Housing, but the money is coming from the roads. And when you see the Ministry of Road budgets, the money is coming from NHAI. So there was some juggleries there in the budgets, which we have to see. My last point, I think I've taken a lot of time, that what are the impediments which are there for the implementation of these budgets. As you have very rightly said, the administrative machinery is very important of the union, state, and local government. They have to work in tandem, which is actually the need of the hour in the framework of the cooperative federalisms. So thank you very much. I think I've taken a little more time with this.
Thank you, Dr. Alok. I think that was a very bold attempt to offer a review of the budget. And also thanks to you for taking us through the technicalities of of finance and highlighting the challenges. I'm sure there are many lessons in your talk, and we would be working more on this along with IMPRI. Without taking any further time, I would like to invite Professor Tathagata Chatterjee, who has been waiting patiently to give his remarks.
Thank you, Rumi, and thank you, Soumyadip, and thank you, IMPRI, for inviting me. Now, regarding this year's budget, I would share some of the points that was made by Professor Chetan Vaidya, that I was really kind of taken aback by so much emphasis that urban planning got in the budget. I think when the finance minister was speaking, I think she spoke almost 5 minutes on urban planning issues and strengthening of city governance capacities and capacity building, about TOD projects, about land digitalization, and various, and of course, new institutions of excellence. So in that sense, it is some sort of a dream budget. But I think, talking about but that is actually the softer side of the budget. It does not cost that much. About the financing side of the budget, I think we need to differentiate the budget into two categories. I think on the one hand, the budget has taken a very bold look towards the future. It has talked about the sustainable development goals. It has received a lot of priority in the budget, and also commitment towards making climate change resilience, improving green finance, green bonding. So in that sense, the budget has taken a very futuristic look. On the other hand, when it comes to the very more immediate issues of the budget, so in the immediate issues of the budget, that is about the financial allocations to different central sector schemes, I think there the allocations has gone up to some extent, but very, very marginally. One of the most important schemes, that is the Amroth Scheme. In Amroth, practically there has not been any change. It has remained the previous year's level. The smart cities has received only some very meager allocation added. But what I was most disappointed in the budget was about the urban livelihoods. The previous year's budget, and in fact, I commented on this previously, because, as Professor Alok has also made the point that, we are going through a phase of very huge unemployment. So under this situation, and poverty has to a very large extent transferred from rural areas to urban areas. So it is no longer sufficient to talk that the urban areas are richer and the rural areas are poor, and the migration. So what the pandemic situation has linked that the Indian economy, the urban and the rural are very strongly integrated. So we cannot differentiate urban and the rural in that sense. And large amounts of rural poverty has now transferred to the cities. So in that sense, there was a lot of expectations that in the budget, there will be an urban employment guarantee scheme, something along the lines of NREGA. Although personally, I'm not very much in favor of a separate scheme. I would rather like to see that the National Urban Livelihood Mission, which is an existing scheme, it has got an institutional infrastructure, and it is an institutional infrastructure of it is kind of spread almost to all small towns. Here in Odisha, we see that it is spread to almost all small towns. So instead of having a separate scheme, it would be much better to strengthen the National Urban Livelihood Mission rather than starting again another scheme from an administrative point of view. Now, there had been some states which has launched their schemes on their own, like Odisha, like Himachal. They have launched their own livelihood schemes. But the pandemic situation has, the state finances has also been very badly impacted. So the ability of the state governments to provide benefits under these schemes are very limited. In Odisha, there had been an attempt to start a scheme called Mudra, Mukhya Mantri Rozgar Yojana. The people under who are beneficiaries at this scheme, they are doing some civil works like building roads or laying drains in small and medium-sized towns. So that is providing some minimum livelihood support, and they are also being aligned with the SHGs, the self-help groups. So that is the same structure that is they are working through the self-help group formation in the case of Odisha. And that can be a model for other states in India also. So I was hoping that the urban livelihood issues should get more boost, but that has not happened. But on the positive side, there is higher allocation, capital allocation for many of the infrastructure projects. So there is a lot of emphasis on roads. So many of the roads or linking of the rivers. So many of these schemes also has got an urban implication, particularly, the roads sector. So there is a need to have a study on what are the benefits those are coming out from these schemes. So I think, high capital intensive projects, what are their what benefits are they bringing in terms of economic growth and livelihoods? I think, that area, I think we need to have more data. We need to have more detailed investigation on that sector. Another point I would like to make is that there is definitely a need for empowerment of the cities and to make the cities stand on their own feet, so that the cities to raise their own funds through their own sources and not to be too much dependent on the state and the central funding. But here it has become some sort of a catch-22 situation, whether we do empower them first or we build the capacity first. This has become some sort of a catch-22 situation. And here I think, the central 15th Finance Commission has made a very good beginning, that, it has differentiated the 50 million plus cities and the rest of the cities, where the 50 million plus cities, they have got higher funds, but that higher fund has come against a performance linked process. So that funding is not automatic. So on the one hand, there is a pressure on these cities to improve their performance, but the performance improvement cannot come without empowering. So I think, regarding the question of decentralization, we need to take a graded approach and empower these 50 million plus cities on a priority, and the second and the third tier cities in the next level. So this does not mean that I am saying that the small and the medium-sized towns should not be empowered. They would definitely need to be empowered, but we need to take a graded approach and first empower the bigger cities which has got higher capacity to generate jobs and employment. And because the big cities are in this age of globalization, throughout the world, it is the metropolitan regions which are the engines of the economic growth. Even in India, it is the metropolitan regions which are the engines of the economic growth. So we need to empower the metropolitan cities if we are to generate jobs and the economic growth. And here there is another point, that although we call the cities as the engines of economic growth, but the city governments hardly has any economic role. The city governments do not have any power of to outline their own economic growth direction. So I think, that is a point we need to think about when we talk about the vision for the next 25 years. So I think, with this, I would like to stop here, and we'll wait. If there is any other point, I will be happy to discuss.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee. Your points were very interesting and important, especially the point about unemployment. There is a lot of concern on that front. And also your idea of following a graded approach would certainly be a useful way to proceed. Without taking further time, I would like to invite the final panel speaker for today, Dr. Sandeep Thakur, who is with the National Institute of Urban Affairs. Over to you, Dr. Thakur.
Please unmute yourself, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Rumi, and thanks for inviting me for this panel discussion. So many things have already been spoken about cities and infrastructure and investments. And so therefore, I would like to speak on the more specific things, and I will divide my presentation in three parts. One, Rumi said that what is the past experience. So I first try to speak on the past experience of cities on revenue mobilization and their performance. Second, my observation on the budget 2022. And third will be this year's challenges for the cities. So the first thing is that if we talk about the performance or the past experience of the cities in doing their revenue mobilization and facing a lot of conditions from the Central Finance Commission for the grants. And so first was it started with the JNNERM. A lot of conditionalities were there to get the grants from the center, but it was only focused for the 64 cities. And then 13 Finance Commission came, and it gave 9 reforms conditionalities, and cities and states had a lot of struggle to meet those conditionalities. And surprisingly, for the last year of the 13 Finance Commission period, only 9 states were able to, get the grants and could qualify those conditions. So the reforms keep on moving, So the second is the 14 Finance Commission also came up with some reforms. Those were very, not very tough conditions, but somehow a new performance grant scheme was made, and then a lot of conditionalities was brought in, and then cities found it very difficult to meet. And in the last year, only 50% of the cities could qualify for those performance grant. And unfortunately, Ministry of Finance did not release funds for the last 2 years of the 14 Finance Commission period. So the thing is that the reforms are not continued. I mean, it has been observed that the various finance commissions which are coming, central finance commissions or mission programs at the central level, the reforms are not continued, and it keep on changing, and cities and states find it difficult to continue with those reforms, what to do with those reforms. For example, if you take 13 Finance Commission, one of the reform was to constitute a state property tax boards. Now today's situation is that nobody knows that how many states these property tax boards are functional and what they are doing. So that is why the problem of the property tax is still after 20 years also, the cities are struggling with the property tax. So my observation after this, when this budget speech, some of the points, they say that I take it as a vision. I mean, for example, if they say the high-level committee for urban planners and economists to be formed. So this is not a one-year thing. It's a vision, and it has to show results in short-term and long-term period, maybe 5 years or 20 years time. And most importantly, they have granted 250 crores for 5 existing academic institutions for urban planning. So that is also a very good thing, that if the urban planners and economists come forward to see these issues with the cities and reforms, how to continue with these reforms for a short-term period or a long-term period, whether it is to be continued, it is to be discontinued. This needs a serious what do you say, that call, that how should we move about this. Now, third point which I come to is that this year challenges, when we madam said that the budget is only, although the budget is only annual thing, but the hidden thing behind that is that the 15 Finance Commission has given allocations for the next 5 years. So those things are not repeated here. And one thing which I observe in the budget is that they have allocated 60,000 crores to provide tap water connections to 3.8 crores households in 22-23. Now, I don't know whether these 60,000 crores are over and above the Amroth mission's allocations for water supply and 15 Finance Commission's allocations for the water supply. Because 15 Finance Commission has, recommended or allocated 1,21,000 crore for the next 5 years. And basically the only two sectors are addressed in that. One is that water supply, sanitation and solid waste management. So these things are already allocated there, and this 60,000 crore is for the water supply, will be a very advantage thing for the cities, because the pure focus is on water supply. It clearly comes out that. Now, if we talk about 15 Finance Commission thing, annual thing, a lot of conditions have been imposed by the 15 Finance Commission, and it is not easy now for the cities to get the grant. One of the previous member of the Finance Commission has said that in the coming years, over the next 5 years, states will likely to get less money and more conditions from the center. So these conditions, if you take into the consideration, if I talk about 13 Finance Commission's conditions or reforms conditions, 14 finance commissions, cities and states found it very difficult to meet those conditions. And now the conditions for the audited accounts and for constitution of state finance commissions and tabling of the report and action taken report, and then notification of minimum flow rates for property tax. And then you talk about property tax growth rate in tandem with the GSDP growth rate. So, and more importantly thing is that in the 13 Finance Commission and 14 Finance Commission, the grants were divided in two parts. One was basic grant without any condition, and the second was the performance grant condition. So for the performance grant, the conditions were there, and some states missed on that. So it was not a very big dent on the grants which were to be devolved from the center. But this time, 100%, it is entry-level conditions. It's mandatory for all the cities to achieve these conditions. And now these conditions have been given to the states. So states has to work hard for this to meet these conditions. And if they are not able to meet this condition in the coming years, cities are going to suffer. So if I come directly to the this year allocations are, as Alok rightly said, around 23,000 crores. Am I right, Alok? So it is 22,908 crore rupees. And out of that, 31.5% is for million plus cities and 68% is for the non-million plus cities. And then for the non-million plus cities, Finance Commission earlier, when they gave the report for the 1 year, they didn't have any funds for, they just have funds for particular sectors, and they didn't have any allocations for the basic functions. So when we submitted on behalf of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs urban memorandum to the 15th Finance Commission, we said that there should not be less conditionalities, and the more and more untied grants should be given to the cities so that they can, prioritize their sectors and expenditure, and they know very well about their shortcomings and where to spend all those things. If we just say that you have to spend on these sectors, so then tied grants is a bit kind of problem for the cities. So this time they have agreed for a basic kind of grant for 18 functions, which is untied, and out of this annual grant of 15,681 for non-million plus cities, 40% is for the 18 functions, and rest of the 30% is for sanitation and water supply each. So overall, the things which are coming is that although the budget has not allocated specifically for cities in numbers, the amounts which is to be devolved in the coming years and for this particular year, but this is directly related to already what 15 Finance Commission has made the allocations. So the only challenges which I see for this particular year is that conditions are less stringent particularly for 22-23. But from 23-24, rest of the 3 years, the conditions will be very tough for the cities. And more importantly, what I have to say is that in the time of pandemic, when this COVID were on the peak, and then this report came, 15 Finance Commission, still they made this conditions very tough for cities to get the central grants. Cities, RBI report recently on the state finances has given a very important observation that most of the cities have seen the fall in their revenue collections. So in the time of when the revenue collections are falling in the cities and they are not able to cope up with the growth which earlier they were showing, the things will be tough for the cities. And I try to compare the property tax with the GSDP growth rate. Things are not the past. If I share you one of my, if you can see this graph, Can you see it? So property tax growth compared with GSDP growth, most of the states are not able to meet that condition. And property tax growth is 2%, 3%, and sometimes negative. And if the people are not paying for a particular year, it turns into arrear. It will come in the next year. But for that particular year, how it will be shown as an increase? That is the challenge for the cities now. And those are my observations. And let's see cities meet this challenge and at least try to get central grants. And if they are able to get the central grants, their own revenues will also improve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sandeep Thakur. That was wonderful, very good points. And especially the point about the barrier of putting conditionalities at the time of release of grants to the lower levels of the government is something that should be seriously considered. And also some adjustments in the approach that the government is following during pandemic times is necessary. This brings us to the next section of the program, and that is to do with the views of the discussants. We have three very knowledgeable persons whom I would like to invite to give their opinion in general on the budget or on the presentations made by the panelists. And I would like to begin with Mr. Samir Unhale.
Yeah, very good evening. I would like to be as brief as possible. I think budget is the time in which the economic and financial conditions of urban India comes into highlight. And as it has been very beautifully summed up by our earlier panelists, I won't really repeat that. But I just share two of my observations, which I think would be interesting in discussing with our academician friends. First, I think is the constitutional framework that the urban affairs is still very much a state subject list. And therefore, by this peculiarity, I believe there's a lot of the peculiar patterns that we see. Maybe the issue of missions, the need of missions, the need of conditionalities in the missions arise out of this constitutional, peculiarity that urban development is very much a state subject. I think only urban mobility is a part of concurrent list. So that probably is a reason why we have so many missions in urban areas and centrally sponsored schemes, so to say. Secondly, I felt was that the mission approach that has been, which started actually from the NIUA and is continuing, is focusing on a particular sector, like Visva-Bharati focuses on sanitation, on solid waste. Amroth focuses by and large on water supply, on water treatment, maybe the other NULM is on livelihood, smart cities on the peculiarities. So I think the various missions which are focusing a particular area, theme in urban India, in my view, is now just started to showing certain impact. As far as the reports on the finance commissions are there, I think that of course has been dealt in very fairly. I only have one reflection actually, that once the GST was implemented, the compensation to the large metro cities and towns was done by the government, and post 5 years after the GST imposition, there's no clarity actually for us as to what the scene would be regarding GST compensation for bigger metro regions. I think I would share another two sentences really, that as was mentioned by our friend, that the state also is should now come up with their own approaches and measures. As far as the urban wage component is concerned, I think the government of Maharashtra already has in fact it's from 2015-16. There's a urban wage component mission for the transitory towns in the state, and that part is available. But I think the urban wage in cities and towns mostly comes of construction labor, and because there is lots of emphasis on urban infrastructure in any case, probably the necessity of a separate urban wage component could be a matter of academic deliberations. Regarding the future, I think for finances, the ability of the cities to go in for non-tax and non-grant finances, I think will have to be explored more and more. Of course, there are the history of urban financing, even in very developed economies, has not been spectacular, especially the urban crisis in the what historians call as the Ford era in the then US scene in 1970s is something which is always at the back of the mind, because if you build a huge solid waste management project or a water treatment plant or a sewage treatment plant, that's extremely capital intensive. It's not going to create much revenue, and how to repay those loans and those interests would always be a issue that requires some further thinking and deliberations. So by and large, I think what initially in the very first statement in which Madam had said that urban economics is important, it is getting important. I think IMPRI was one of the leaders in trying to make an effort to study the urban economics or economic base of a city in a small project. So by and large, I think this mainstreaming of urban economics and finance happens in the times of budget making. And of course, there's another issue I thought I would be sharing, that there are various other ministries who also have an allocation which has an impact on urban areas. And maybe the best thing I can think of is the education department, the education mission has a lot of funds which goes into urban area, which probably doesn't get counted, so to say, in the budgetary allocations for the purely ministry or the purely urban areas. So probably there is a need of a study that, which will study the budgetary allocations of all the ministries and try to find out which of that part is really getting focused into the urban areas. So I think this is because as everything was scored so well, it was a delight to listen to all the deliberations, and thank you very much for that. And also very erudite chairmanship of Dr. Rumi ji. So thanks a lot for this opportunity. And if there is some time at the end, we will definitely share some thoughts. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Onale. Grateful to you for taking out time to participate in this program and for sharing the experience of Maharashtra. I would like to invite Mr. Arvind Unni, if Arvind is connected.
Yes, connected, Dr. I'm here.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So really appreciate the discussion and for the lovely points, and happy to be a part here and sharing a few pointers on what we think. So firstly, I think I would kind of want to start with the point of that I would want to do more of an economic analysis, break down the numbers. So that's still happening, and this probably group deliberating on that is also quite useful for us to kind of understand that better. But overall, I would say that from a non-economist perspective of the budget, I was much more happy with the last budget than this one. And there are fundamentally one or two reasons for that. One, that we are still right in the center of the pandemic. We are having or have just escaped the third wave. We might have future waves, but the impact of the pandemic is just not on the health, but the whole unemployment figures and the way incomes have kind of reduced is something that we are very closely able to see with what's happening in the communities that we are working with. Point number one. Point number two is that between the option of choosing a capital investment-led recovery or a more immediate support that a lot of these marginal population groups or worker groups required, we have opted for the first one and not for the second one, which is totally fine and understandable. But what we were really expecting was of a mixture of both that also addresses the immediate consumption needs of the people, as well as a long-term recovery, which I felt was clearly missing in this budget. So it is from this perspective that I enter and make three arguments on, firstly, the content, second, the manner, third, I think the conflicts and challenges that I foresee from our experience of working on the ground with communities, with urban planning and other issues. So on the content aspect, there are these schemes like housing, mass transport, focusing wrongly, I would say, on the metros. A lot of these decently performing schemes, which are more capital intensive, which have almost gotten the same amount of funding and are getting carried forward to the next year without a little introspection on what could be done better so that the marginal population groups could benefit. So that is one content. Second are the content which are very good sounding words, very contemporary, very important also, not negating the importance of, let's say, climate action, but with not much clarity on how much resources, funds are allocated in the present and what are you going to really do in the next 1 year. So that is the point number 2. Third is the case of amnesia, complete amnesia. So what Mahalaya madam said, that she looked for word urban, I looked for a word called workers in the budget speech. It's not there. We are in the center of the pandemic. Last year, the budget was about workers. There was mention of gig workers. There was, clean air program. So there were mention of these words, and these words, like you, Dr. rightly mentioned, have an impact on the policy, have an impact on how the things unfold in cities. But sadly, if you do a simple word search itself, there is this amnesia of nice sounding words, very important words that you had in the last budgets. Smart city is also actually missing, at least in the budget speech, but it's there in the funding, but a very little funding, like the way Professor Alok has mentioned. So there are these amnesias that or amnesia which has happened, and you are leaving behind a lot of commitments that you had made in the past and would have made a huge difference if they are there and continued forward. Last point on the content aspect, rather than saying that urban has got a very good focus and attention, I would rather say that this is an admission of guilt, because the way smart cities has failed is primarily the reason of this shift, that, okay, we are not able to deliver smart cities, let's focus on a long-term plan. So that, for me, it's more of an admission of guilt as opposed to a very good approach to reform urban planning. Second, on the manner in which the budget speech or the content is delivered, I would say look at the last year's speech and this year's speech. There is not much to really understand the figures, the allocations, the preciseness of information. That is not there. And for people like us, it's very tough to understand and engage with the process. The goalposts have shifted. So now we are talking not of 5 years, not of 2 years. Now we are talking of Amrit Kal, which is going to come in 25 years. So the shifting goalpost is fine, which is very important, long-term perspective, but you need better measurements also, again, for the schemes that you have forgotten or failed to mention in the present. Closing comments, I would say, where I found it to be really challenging and possible conflicts in future going ahead. One is that planning has always been a very contested terrain. We have had economic liberalization. Our policies have changed from 1990s onwards, but our city and city planning has not changed. I mean, it's still 1980s, 1970s. So there was this backlash that was being experienced, and from whatever that we have experienced in Delhi, Mumbai, the last big few master plan exercises, there was always this push for reform in planning. But if reforms in planning is not with social justice and with a focus on the newer challenges that cities are facing, I think that would be something that we have to really be careful of. Point number one. Budget has a good space to push in some very good policy perspectives, which this has done, but could have been a lot more. I again go back to the last budget, which talked about affordable housing policy, rental housing policy, migrant workers, e-Shram. So all of that has origins in the last budget. This one could have done better in that respect. Lastly, I would say 2 points, last points. One, that here you don't file ULBs. You only find eminent institutions, which is probably rather a formalization of already informal existing group of architects, bodies, urban planners, which are getting a eminent status. So are these not, if not the ULBs, who should be the ones who should be capacitated, then tell me, why are they not the educational / training arm of the government, which is almost like another SPV that could really operate and start working in the cities directly. Lastly, I think, yes, it's multidisciplinary. Mahalaya ma'am mentioned that they have recognized and they're talking about economists, a different bunch of people to be part of the process, but they've missed ULBs, they've missed people. And my experience of engaging with master plans over the last so many years is that even though we are more technologically advanced, it is this technology that's kind of acting as a barrier and is still leaving out people. So that is going to be a big fundamental challenge as we go into this whole reform spree in urban planning without looking at who's getting left out. Because probably the last 20 years, or maybe the plans before 1990s offered a lot of room for these marginal communities because they were not, they were not as digital, or they offered that regal room for communities to kind of to make their claim in the state. But this will not. So these are the challenges that I feel going forward we will have to be thinking about. And it would be very useful. I think it's an appeal to the group also, something that I mentioned to Arjun, that we also then have to see of what we do in between these two budget years to really ensure that selective amnesias don't happen and we keep a track of what's happening. I think that would be an appeal to the group also. Thanks for this.
Thank you, Arvind. That was wonderful, nice points, very useful. And the final speaker for today, Mr. Tanaji Chakravarti. May I invite you to give your words?
Thank you, Rumi. I hope I'm audible.
You are.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to IMPRI and this very august collection of almost doyens of the urban domain. I'm having a slight technical difficulty with the
no issues.
With the video. So if I can continue. I think almost all that had to be said has been said, and there is very little to say apart from making just a few simple observations. First of all, I think we should not look at this year's budget as in isolation. If we look at the National Urban Policy Framework Strategic Intent, which was released by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs in October 2020, there is a clear mention of a lot of the points that have been reflected in this year's budget. Having said that, I think as probably a designated urban economist, I think this is one of the budget which really gives us some recognition of being an urban economist, and that in itself is good. I think India's urban narrative requires deep thinking and has to go beyond mere platitudes of what either is said in any policy document or what as professionals in this domain we think individually or collectively. I think the need of the hour is convergence. Professor Chatterjee very nicely mentioned about multidisciplinary, but having worked a little bit on partnership projects in the UK, especially places like Paddington regeneration. I think the way forward is basically to ensure that all the different disciplines come together as a convergence rather than remaining as a discipline or a silo. And the second aspect, I think, which was really very nicely highlighted by Professor Vaidya, with whom I've had a long association at SPA Delhi. I think what he has talked about is this Center of Excellence for Planning is really unprecedented in that sense. So I think we should take the positives out and see both as multi-stakeholders what can be made out of this, because India's urban narrative really is quite a anguishing one. Whilst we are sitting, we can all look at the air quality that we are breathing and the water quality, etc. And also, I think it was mentioned by one of the esteemed panelists, the need to incorporate, I think, what we call the tier 2 and tier 3. If India's urban future has to be equitable, then we have to stop making this distinction between tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, and really take them as a collective to provide a basic minimum level of infrastructure and a platform so that almost all of them can become the kind of base that we are looking for urbanization. It would be foolhardy to say that only our cities would have the ability to take on the onus of urbanization. As one of my professors has very succinctly written, Dr. Professor Arun Kumar from JNU, that beyond a point, mega cities actually become diseconomies. And we are seeing that in a lot of cases across the world, as indeed in India. I mean, if you include the cost of the impact, the negative impact that a city like Delhi has on your health, then it is a diseconomy to stay in Delhi. There is no question about it. So therefore, we cannot take just the mega metros or the mini metros and talk about tier 2 and tier 3 as a kind of a follow-up. We have to take all of that together. And I think this budget has somewhere made an attempt to at least understand the problem by saying that, okay, there'll be a center of excellence in planning. And I have, as Professor Vaidya knows, taught planning students and design students for almost 20 years. And there's always been this, thing about planning and design. But I think it's time for all of us to move on and talk about convergence. And take the best from all the disciplines, whether it is equity, whether it's labor force participation, whether it is sustainability, because without any of these components, talking about a comprehensive, holistic, sustainable urban future for India is really futile. I think I'll close over there. It's a rather more eagle view of, and I've taken the ability. The ability of whatever I've heard, and kind of try to summarize before the chair proceeds on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chakravarti, for your comments and thoughts. We are now into the next phase of the discussion, and if there are any questions or comments, we can, although we are running a little late, but we can invite 1 or 2 questions or comments from the participants.
Yes, Satpalji has raised hand.
Okay. So Dr. Satpal Singh.
Yes, sir, you are here. You can have your mic on and video. Okay, meanwhile, sir, there is a question which has come.
Just a minute, I have to leave for some personal reasons. Please excuse me. It's a pleasure to sit with all of you. Thank you.
Hello. Can I give a comment, small comments?
Yes, right, sir.
Yes,
Hello.
we can hear you. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Rumi. I have one comment over there. Then there is a lot of budget allocation, union budget allocated the fund to the state government, and the state government is given to the ULBs. And I found this time the budget is allocated. Budgetary support is provided by the union government to the state government for the Visva-Bharati mission. That is the combined allocation, that is water and sanitation sector. In waste sanitation sector, so there is a solid waste management allocation. And we found that there is a lot of money comes from the center and the state government to the ULBs, but the ULBs are not able to provide the adequate services to the people. I don't find any change, any improvement in the solid waste management system. The problem of solid waste management is still persist in the most of the cities. So I am looking for the solution. What are the possible solution or water sustainability of the city sustainable solid waste management system in India? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
So we also have one question, and that is from Shonit. He's a India Smart City Fellow. Would you like to come and ask it, Shonit? You can unmute and come. Yes, please go ahead. Please be brief also. Yes, go ahead, Shonit. Okay, some connection problem. Let me read it. Whether India needs a separate department of design, urban design, in order to streamline all the big announcements in recent times, Panchamrit policy at COP26, Glasgow budget and economic survey. Whether, yes, also why we are getting habitual of goal shifting approach, whether extending timelines of smart cities mission or several urban flagship schemes, are we got imposed in popular keywords only rather than de facto implementation? So repackaging is the point I guess Shonit is trying to highlight. So Rumi sir, how would like to take this further? Please unmute, sir.
If the panelists would like to say, comment on the 2 points. Yes, Professor Vaidya.
I don't think there is a separate department of urban design. What I am seeing is now a lot of urban design people who conventionally thought in 3 dimensions are not talking about urban planning, and urban planners are learning the tricks of urban design. So what we need is these 2 professions combined, financing and institutional structure, to come together. So that is the interdisciplinary approach, rather than setting a separate department of design. As far as the question is, I think last 2 have been most unfortunate. So naturally, there are some changes in the goals in different missions, and we should want to leave it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rumi.
Yes, Professor Alok, yes, please.
Change in the goal is actually, we can't really compare that. In this particular budget, this budget was, as the announcement, one can see this particular budget. First of all, there is no 5-year plan as such. So the first budget that the present finance minister, she presented, there was a lot of policy announcement without any outlay and outcome. So that was, one can see as a substitute of a 5-year plan. Thereafter is an annual budget exercise. And the goalpost has been changing. Why? Because we are in the 75th year. And now the government is talking about the next 25 years or so. So I think there is a rationale to say that we are getting into an Amrit era or golden era, whatever you call it. So I think so that one has to see from that angle. Now there's another question that has come is economic survey. Do we need another department? I don't think so. There is a separate department for economic survey, because economic survey as such is prepared by the Department of Economic Affairs, not just the Department of Economic Affairs, by the Chief Economic Advisor, which keeps quite a distance from the government. He's actually an autonomous institution, Chief Economic Advisor. So they get all kinds of data with them. All the ministries interact with the Ministry of Finance. They actually finally clears those proposals from the Department of Expenditure. So I think there is no need to have a separate department outside the ministry, but it has to be within the ministry. They have to work with them, but at the same time, they have to keep their autonomy intact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So there are no other questions.
No other questions?
No, but sir, I can just pose one. Just
sure.
like this budget.
And I would also like to invite Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay. He also specializes on these matters. He may have something to say.
Right. Okay. And yes, so I just wanted to ask that how does all the panelists see the announcement that by 2047, India will be 50% urbanized? Because now the figures, what we have to 2011 was almost, 34%. So is it also a conservative estimate? Because China is already at 2/3, 66%. So will India's urbanization rate at that time at India at 100 will be 50, or we are looking for 75, 80%? So is that also a conservative estimate we are looking at? Soumyadip sir, over to you if you want to add anything or any question.
No, it's not a question, but I think it's wonderful to listen to all these eminent panelists. And as we all know that this year budget envisages a kind of paradigm change. And as all of our experts and panelists, they say that there are some positives on as expected. But this effectiveness of some of these bold measures, so-called, and their impacts for facilitating urban development seems to be rather uncertain. For example, there are some talking about these green bonds and green infrastructure. Well, as far as the bonds municipal bonds are concerned, we all know the situation of, or the progress of municipal bond in India. And also we are talking about green infrastructure when a significant proportion of urban citizens, they lack access to some of the basic services, which are, I think we are also lagging behind these sustainable development goals and all these things. So yeah, all these green bonds, green infrastructure, they are a bit catchy, but how far they are in sync with the urban realities. So that is another point of discussion, I think. Another is there is also this year budget provides a lot more emphasis on this local capacity building and all these things. But as some of our panelists have already mentioned, like what we need is the genuine empowerment of the local government, because even after more than 25 years of amendment to the constitution, most of the cities in India, they lack genuine autonomy to make and implement their decisions. So and Professor Tanaji rightly mentioned about the graded sort of decentralization. Like when we talk about decentralization, generally we do not make any kind of differentiation among the different types of the urban local bodies that we have in India. So definitely these are some of the issues which are really challenging. And as far as this budget is concerned, also one of our experts mentioned that generally in the policy circles, some of these budget documents are taken very seriously. So some policy, some lines on these aspects could have been much more useful. But nevertheless, we can be optimistic and hope that our cities will get sort of stronger and livable, maybe during this this Amrit Kal and Amrit era. So these are some of my comments, because that's all from my side.
No, these are very good comments. It's always a pleasure to listen to your views. About the point that Dr. Arjun Kumar raised on level of urbanization occurring in the country and how do we foresee it? I think Mr. Unni has made a very interesting and important comment that we are already more urbanized than what the Census of India data are showing. And there is a lot of talk on this subject. We all know, the panelists, eminent panelists sitting here, they all know about the urbanization that is occurring at the periphery of cities, and many of such phenomenon are not considered at the time of collecting information on how urban India is. And it has to do with the definition to a great extent. And there is a call for revising the definition of urban in the country. But India is already more urbanized than what the data show. And but I feel that there is going to be a gradual transformation insofar as addition of a population to urban areas is concerned. It's not going to be as rapid, but it is going to be a gradual transformation.
Right, Arvind was raising hand. Arvind?
No, my only point was that we cannot have, or should not rather have some department of urban design. I would rather focus on, do we have a urban governance department anywhere? I mean, if we require one at this stage in Ministry of Housing, Urban Affairs, which is, look, with all due respect for very good work that the ministry is doing in many fronts, I think if we need to have a department, it would be on that, because Panchayati Raj frameworks have such a ministry. It could be a debate of what they're doing, not doing, achieving. So let's stick to our fundamentals and then do that. One little point about shifting goalposts, I'll just take 30 more seconds. One, like for instance, there is no harm in admitting any project or any scheme or intervention. If it succeeds, great, we evaluate, we do well. Many schemes are doing well, PM's Swanidhi, Swachh Bharat Mission, so on and so forth. But unless we evaluate our schemes better, how are we going to improve as we go forward, right? So classic example, GIFT, smart cities, control and command centers. So we can make ourselves happy and say that they are controlling data, they're doing this, but we also what happened during COVID, right? I mean, what data could we provide to really help our people who are in need of 10 things that was required at that point of time. Point number 2, if our urban areas at this stage require an urban livelihood program, there is no harm in admitting that. And even though as a nation in our development trajectory, we should not be, let's say, engines of economy and providers of livelihoods and jobs, but we need to understand that probably at this stage we require that, because the harm that it's causing to a lot of population groups who are dependent on livelihoods, daily existence, that would be much more if we don't kind of recognize and act on it, is what I wanted to kind of mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind. The next section is way forward. Dr. Arjun, what do you think? There are already a lot of ideas for way forward that have been shared by the by the speakers. And it may not be easy to, it's not a very simple issue, it's a very complicated issue. And to determine a way forward, where do we go from here? May not be a very simple point to address. But if any of the panelists who haven't got a chance to speak before we conclude, wishing to say anything on this front, please, you're welcome.
Professor Alok and Professor Chatterjee has raised hand.
Ji, please.
I just wanted to say, Rumi, you see, why are we expecting everything from the union government for the urban development? We need to enhance the capacity of the state government on that line as per the constitutions, right? One of the speakers said the Ministry of Panchayati Raj is there, but the Ministry of Panchayati Raj was created only in 2004 just to handhold the states to see whether the provisions of Part 9 of the constitutions are implemented in literal spirit or not, including Article 243 ZD, that is about the district planning committee, okay, which is a mandatory provision of the constitutions. Similarly, you have one department in the Ministry of Urban Development, whatever you call it. Why can't the two departments be put together? There could be a Ministry of Local Governments. I mean, I somehow not very comfortable when we use the word urban local bodies. We ourselves denigrate these institutions. The word there in the constitution is municipalities. And if we have to substitute, we need to substitute this with the local self-government or local government as the word used internationally. Okay. So if we identify that is one government, elected government, which means the government can tax it, then you respect it. Okay. So that's one. As I said, the Indian Constitution identified two orders of government. At the top of it, the 73rd and 74th was a patchwork and superimposed over this. Okay. But the Indian system as such, we have been working only two orders of government. First of all, there is a need to change Article 266 of the constitutions. Article 266, there was a change that whatever money, after the 10 finance commissions, the money from the union divisible pool will be net of the state transfers. Okay. So now the 41% is transferred after the 15 finance commission, 42 before that. Now the planning commission has gone. So there is only one institution which is for the transfer system, that is the finance commission, right? Now you also have the state finance commissions. The state finance commission as such have not been strengthened. So state finance commission need to be strengthened. The 15 finance commissions has written extensively on this. They have actually allocated some money for the constitution of state finance commission by the year 2024, right? So Article 266, further, it can say the money from the state revenue be net of, the state consolidated fund be net of the transfer to panchayat and municipalities. Okay. And the panchayat and municipality, they must have its own list. The 11th and 12th schedule is not going to work. This is again, there's a misnomer that these are the functions that need to be devolved to these municipality. That's not correct. The schedule 12 contain all the matters on this. The verticals by the union and the states need to be designed, right? So there is many things that need to be done. There is, in fact, the drafting of the 73rd and 74th itself is not. In fact, it's a very big constitutional amendment, bigger than the American constitutions, and Part 9 and Part 9A is a carbon copy to each other. So I think that need to, there is a need to have a relook of this after 25 years or so. And of course, the city government is a mega cities and other things. They need to be consulted in the international fora, because many of the international agencies, whether bilateral agencies or the multilateral agencies, They do have their offices. They're in the mega cities, and the mega cities have to interact with them, but they have no say whatsoever in the international affairs. Okay, so and in many other federal countries, that's what is happening, but not here in India. Okay, so I think these are some of the points that need to be highlighted, and that's what at this point of time. Thank you, Rumi.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee. Your brief point.
Yeah. I think, many of these issues that we are discussing boils down to the political economy of urbanization, how urbanization is seen in the overall political economic structure of the country, and what is the total level of urbanization in India also remains a very contested definition. On the one hand, we have the census definition, which is one of the most stringent in the world. So we have three criteria, that is density criteria, the occupancy criteria, the total population criteria. In that sense, Indian census definition is one of the most stringent in the world. The second, theoretically, if we follow the census definition, we are 35% urban by now, 2021. But again, a large number of so-called urban areas are the census towns, which continue to be governed as rural. So even if we take the 2011 figure of 31% urban, so if we leave out the census towns, so then it is only, India is only about 25%, 26%, it is governed as urban. So I think, there is a need as we step into the 75th year of independence and we are talking about the next 25 years, we need to rethink about the federal structure, the relationship between the center and the state and the local government. And in that sense, many of the countries, when they frame the new urban agenda, according to the UN Habitat, the new urban agenda. So the new urban agenda took into consideration that urban governance does not happen only at one level. It happens at the level of the state government, it happens at the national government level. So it happens at multiple levels. And new urban agenda provides a kind of a platform to bring a conversation between these multiple tiers of government. And some of the countries has taken this as a way forward to create a forum for discussion across these different tiers. In India, we earlier had this National Development Council as part of the Planning Commission, but now the Planning Commission has got disbanded. I think, there is a need to have a structure on that front. So where the center and the state and the local governments can all take part together. So I think, and another point is that there is a huge disconnect between what we call the cities and their voting powers. So the electoral constituencies are still being drawn based on a very earlier census. So they are disproportionately in favor of the rural areas. So I think, we need to look at some of these anomalies.
Great.
For a bigger discussion.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's a very, we are moving towards the topic of urbanization. It's a big theme, big issue. And I'm sure we will discuss the possibilities of organizing more events on the different dimensions or facets of urbanization. But coming back to the topic of today's discussion, budget, I think the important point, many important points have emerged from the discussion that took place, and I'm grateful to all the distinguished speakers from analyzing the budget from their point of view. The need for convergence, the need for greater participation, the the manner in which funds are devolved, the implementation experiences, and the areas which have been left out, such as that of employment programs, especially for urban areas. This is a beginning point for institutions like us who could build on such ideas and prepare a policy paper for use of those who are in the policy making positions, to give them our views, our perceptions or ideas of what we think the budget should, future budgets should have in the scheme of things. I would like to thank all the distinguished panelists, speakers, and would like to hand over the platform to Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director of IMPRI.
Thank you so much, sir. Very enriching discussion. So to formally give a vote of thanks, now invite Soumyadip, sir.
Yes, it's truly been an engaging session, and in our Future City conversation series, we will surely take up many of these issues which have emerged from today's discussion for deeper understanding and deliberations. And so as a customary person, on behalf of the Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, IMPRI, I thank all the panelists who have participated in this particular in this conversation series: Professor Tathagata Chatterjee, Professor V.N. Alak, Arvind Unni, Professor Chetan Vaidya, Mr. Samir Unhale, Mr. Tanaji Chakravarti. If I miss someone, I'm getting Dr. Sandeep Thakur and all Sandeep Thakur and all these things. So and also all those participants who have been with us for this city discussion series, and all those who are watching us live in Facebook and other digital platforms. So once again, thank you to all of you for participating in this important discussion, and we hope to have you in our future city conversation series as well. So thank you, thanks a lot.
Thank you, and special thanks to
thank you
for chairing the session and leading us.
I'm with you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks a lot.